This podcast is aimed at landlords, letting agents and property management companies. A landlord has 5 requirements. The tenant must have citizenship or legal residence so that they can rent the property legally. In the UK, for example, landlords are legally obliged to check a tenant's right to rent. Second of all, there must be the ability and willingness to pay in full and on time. Most tenants would want to do so, but under difficult circumstances, such as job loss or an unexpected drop in income, they may suddenly find themselves unable to, and in recent times, everyone can empathize here. The third factor is a reasonable likelihood of caring for the property. Nobody wants to do an end of tenancy inspection only to find major damage to the property that would take time to repair and might even exceed the value of the deposit. Fourth, we hope the tenant understands decorum and is unlikely to be a nuisance to neighbours. Nobody wants to waste their time dealing with neighbours' complaints. And finally, tenants should not sublet the property or allow unnamed tenants to move in. This can be mitigated by judging the character of applicants. These are the typical areas that form part of standard background checks. However, if we delve deeper, I believe there are additional risks and potential red flags which should also be taken into account. Let's consider the following scenarios. You may find yourself with a tenant whose income is unstable and from time to time falls short of being sufficient to cover the rent. This may be a recent development which began after taking up the tenancy, or, like many in today's climate, perhaps the tenant found themselves furloughed or possibly a gig worker without any support found their income suddenly dried up and there were no savings on which to fall back. In these situations, candour between landlord and tenant is generally the best course of action. Over the coming weeks, we will be inviting letting agents with experience dealing with these scenarios to join our podcast, and we'll ask what advice they typically give to landlords and tenants in these types of situations. Let's now examine some potential red flags that may arise during the screening process. The most common one is when a tenant cannot prove sufficient income or savings. Let's start off by considering savings. We can always ask tenants to provide evidence of current savings, although this only goes so far, as funds could be deposited temporarily or may be earmarked for a purpose other than paying rent. Perhaps $10,000 represents a deposit for a mortgage or a new car. There is no assurance that this would be used first and foremost to cover rent. So what about income shortfalls? Suppose you typically set a 3-to-1 ratio where monthly income should be at least 3 times the monthly rent. Is this a blanket ratio across the country?